The federal immigration minister, Marc Miller, is in Winnipeg this week. He was at an immigration ceremony yesterday, which welcomed more than 80 new citizens to Canada, and he is in studio. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm eager to hear about that bison story. It sounds like it's out of an episode of Yellowstone.
It sounds like it's incredulous, right? As far as the story goes, yeah. How was the citizenship ceremony? Obviously, in your role, you must attend many of these, but what was yesterday like?
I do. They're great. It's hard to get into my minister role because you're just cheering for these guys that have hope. It gives me hope for the country. People are fought to become Canadian. I was given my citizenship, so not that I take it for granted. I think we're the best country in the world, but these people fought to become Canadians. This is a day they'll remember for the rest of their lives, and they're there waving the flag, taking the oath to Canada, and there to make this country better than it is already. So it's really cool to see. I don't get yelled at by them, and it's probably the last point in time where they actually have to listen to me. But that's why we're a democracy. They don't have to listen to politicians after you become a Canadian citizen, and it's just cool to be part of it. And I get to administer the oath, which is almost surreal. But this is really a day about them and being a part of that. I would encourage anyone, elected officials, otherwise, just to be part of them because it really renews your faith in Canada.
Are you being yelled at a lot as a Canadian politician right now?
It happens. It happens. Mostly on Twitter, but I think, frankly, the discourse in Canada has become toxic, but most of my interactions with regular folks is pretty respectful.
Let's talk about some of those regular folks. You're wearing headphones this morning because we have a clip we want to play of a student here, actually. So obviously universities are starting to see the financial implications of the cap on international students. At U of M here locally, University of Manitoba, they're expecting this could be a loss of about $8 million just by the numbers. But international students who are here are also feeling this financial stress because your government reinstated this off-campus work cap. So just for listeners' benefit here, 20 hours a week now. It will go up to 24 hours at some point this fall. So let me stop there for a second. Do we have a timeline on when yet?
Really shortly. We have to make some tweaks to the regulations to get them through, but it's a matter of weeks, I think.
Okay, so this is of concern to U of M student Krupa Ashru. She worked 25 to 30 hours a week last year. Here's what she had to say about how the cap is impacting her life.
It's scary, mostly. I had to move from my old apartment to a further one from both work and uni just because it's more cheaper and so I can afford it better. Because of the limit, it's like I have to put work first and then focus on school later because I know that school is going to be there. It has the set schedule, but for work I need to fix it in somehow so that I'm working all the 24, making the most of it.
I'm sure you're hearing Minister Miller stories like this across the country. How do you defend why this is necessary?
Look, I totally feel for, I think it's important for people to understand my role and some of the tensions that I was dealing with. I was getting calls to cut off-campus hours completely. The 40-hour work week was clear was impacting studies. We bring people in here to study and not to work. At the same time, not naive as to what it costs to live in Canada. So the balance that we're trying to strike to make sure that people are prioritizing their studies is why we fixed that 24-hour period, because we recognize that 20 hours is a lot. I've struggled through that as a student as well. I know your studies are suffering unless you're an exceptional individual. But it is really the exception of people that can work over 20 hours. 24 felt like a balance. It brings us into what is sort of the international norm. There are some countries where people can't work when they're international students. They have to figure out another way to make money. So it's a delicate balance, and as we're adjusting the international student visa system, we want to make sure that the perverse incentives for people to kind of exploit the system are not there. Giving the impression that people can come and not focus on their studies is one of those. But striking that balance, I think, is something I had to struggle with, and it's something we'll completely continue to re-examine. But my focus on this revamped reform system is to focus more on quality and less on quantity.
I want to ask you about another system that's changing. Obviously, you're looking at reducing the number of permanent residents and temporary residents in this country that Canada accepts. Now, there's smaller provinces like ours in Manitoba, which you're well aware of, who want more immigrants. I know that our parliamentary reporter, our legislative reporter rather, Ian Frey, sat down with the provincial immigration minister here, Malaya Marcelino, a few weeks ago. Marcelino said, she would like more than the 9,500, which is is the number that we're using, provincial nominees that have been offered in 2024. Is there a scenario where you could imagine as you're making these decisions, and we're going to hear your numbers in November, I understand, right, for the next 2 years, Canada's targets?
Yep.
But is there a scenario where if one province says we can meet the cap that the feds are asking for, and Manitoba wants to bring in more people, that we can take numbers from another province effectively and bring in more people here, and still federally and nationally you're going to be meeting the numbers that you're targeting? Or is this going to be a flat number that each province is going to be bringing in?
Without kind of scooping my own announcement, Marcy, what I have said to the Premier a couple days ago, what I said to Minister Marcelino is as follows. For provinces that are willing to work with us and willing to be responsible in their duty to make sure that immigrants are well supported when they get here and contributing to the economy, we're willing to work with provinces that take that responsibility. The federal government over the last few years has progressively given to provinces about 100,000+ immigrants to select themselves according to their own criteria. They haven't all necessarily been responsible in the way they've deployed that, and come back to the government complaining that there's too many people and that they don't have the infrastructure to support them. So you can't have it both ways. Part of making sure that we have a controlled immigration system is making sure the federal government is keeping an eye on those institutions, including provinces, including universities and colleges, that have that exceptional privilege of being able to take people in from abroad, but making sure they're actually following through with that and making sure that they're being responsible in supporting these people as they integrate into a new country. So what I said to the Premier is work with us. There's certainly some reflections going on about the acceptable levels of temporary residence in this country, the acceptable numbers of permanent residents. I hear Canadians when they say we need to make sure that we have volumes that are acceptable. And that means every province has to step up and make sure that they are doing their jobs. They can't come to me on one hand and say, we want more people, but then cut immigration. It just doesn't make sense. It would be a complete gutting of the federal government's responsibility. So I've told Manitoba has been exceptionally cooperative with us, has been very positive, at least this iteration of the government. And I think it's something that we can get done together. How
are you going to judge that, though? Because across the country, we have a housing shortage, for example. So if you go to a province and you say, following through the resources, and Manitoba says, well, we're trying to keep up with housing, every province is going to say that. You can't really judge Manitoba or individual provinces for not following through with some of the resources because there's crises that are affecting all of the nation. So how do you judge whether or not a province is positioned, in your view, when you look at the federal numbers, to be able to handle and to be, as you put, upholding their end of sort of the commitment to this?
Well, I think data sets you free in this discussion. The public rhetoric and their past practices and how they've been talking about immigrants and publicly is a good indicator, but data is even a better indicator. So if you look at the job market, look at what postgraduate work permits match the needs in their provinces, that's not data that the federal government has complete authority over. We have our sense of where the jobs are needed, but we need to be able to have a better integrated system with provinces so they can tell us which job markets require that type of immigrant and how they can properly absorb them and support them along the way. We've been able to have pretty good proof points with the province of Manitoba in their responsibility in making sure that their provincial nominee program is adapted to the people that are already here. And Manitoba said quite clearly they want to grow the country, so we'll work with them. It's not a one-way discussion, and so that'll be an evolving discussion. There are discussions in and around infrastructure, the support for the healthcare services, support for education. We need also the sense of what commitments that provinces will make to make sure that we can absorb the number of immigrants that they're asking for. So it's simply about discussion about responsibility and the data to support a lot of the sort of allegations they make to us when they come and ask for more people.
I know you're not going to trump your announcement. I know it's in November, but it's going to set out the next 2 years. So you will reduce the number of people that are admitted to this country each year. Can you give us a sense of how big that reduction will be?
I can't at this moment. They're really ongoing discussions. I would say the reflection is not complete yet. We've had a robust discussion at Cabinet with caucus, but that it's not entirely finalized.
Fair enough. 8:24, we're live with Marc Miller, who's giving us a feature interview in time while he's in Manitoba. He's Minister, of course, of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship in this country. I want to look at a situation that's been very much in the news this week, the relationship between Canada and India, which continues to deteriorate over accusations of foreign interference, government-approved violence on Canadian soil, allegations of such. In September, you said visa applications from India could face more scrutiny was your language in the future. What kind of scrutiny are you talking about, and how does that look right now?
Well, first, I think it's important to say that regardless of your position in cabinet or as an elected official, your number one job is to keep Canadians safe. And foreign interference is serious. The fact that a country can come in and perpetrate criminal acts is something that we need to have zero tolerance for and be quite severe in our reaction. Anything that flows from that is what it is. I can't say that this is not going to get worse before it's going to get better when it comes to what India may do. I have no particular sense of how they may react. We know what they did a few months ago, expelling diplomats, including members of my team. That affected visa processing times. You can only adjust so much. But what I have said to my colleague members of parliament is that this could very well get worse in terms of visa processing before it gets better.
What does that mean, get worse in terms of visa processing?
Well, whatever decisions that India, in its sovereign right, decides to take with respect to members exiting their country and desiring to go to Canada, it is up to them, but that could have an impact. And whatever countermeasures that they may take with respect to people seeking to go to India, there's only so much you can adjust for that. And again, we are at a very, very tense situation with India. And again, foremost is the concern for the safety of people that are in Canada. And there can be zero tolerance for people coming into this country and perpetrating criminal acts. So what that means in real time for people from most of the Indian diaspora trying to go back and forth is there could be some headaches. But again, it could get worse before it gets better. We're very much at the beginning of the public display or the public ventilation of these facts, and so we have to brace for that.
Indian citizens who are already here as permanent residents or on those student or work visas right now, how concerned should they be about their immigration status going forward?
If they're already here, my number one job is to make sure they're safe. When it comes to their immigration status, I would say it's par for the course. There is a rigorous process to screen people, to assess whether they are eligible to become permanent residents and then Canadian citizens. That continues. But again, in these situations, my concern is really for the safeties of the diaspora that feel threatened by the actions of a foreign power.
You've announced to another population of people, you've announced that Palestinians who fled Gaza will receive transitional financial assistance once they arrive here. I know you've already approved 4,000 applications have been approved, but only 334 have arrived. Why so few? Or is that maybe when you look at the trajectory of when the applications came into 334, maybe that's not few, maybe that's on pace of what you would expect. And what is that exact assistance going to look like?
So the assistance that we will provide to people that get here include interim health benefits, settlement services that people that come here from war-torn countries would get as a matter of course. These are people that are under an extreme amount of trauma, so they are and will be supported by the government of Canada as they adapt to their new temporary home. In terms of the processing, there's a war ongoing in Gaza, and the devastation is enormous. The challenges we faced as a government is getting people out of Gaza into Egypt and processing them there. There was no functional ability to do biometrics in Gaza. The safety and security situation is one of concern. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that when you list a group like Hamas as a terrorist organization, that has impacts, and sometimes that can have impacts on innocent people as part of the processing. The processing is slow, but first and foremost, there are things that are beyond our control, our ability to get people out of Gaza. That also means that a guy like me has to be very careful in their public statements of what they say is going on, because I have an important diplomatic function in making sure that I am liaising with, or my teams are liaising with authorities on the ground with whom we may not have necessarily the same thoughts about the situation, whether that's the Israeli government or the Egyptian authorities. But we have to make sure that people are safe. So I'm trying to reunify people with their families if they have them here and get them to Canada as quickly as possible. It has been slow. The success has been mitigated, but it doesn't prevent our resolve. And I'm committed to getting the 5,000 people that we committed to getting to as part of our initiative, our expanded initiative earlier on this year.
And just as a final question, Minister Miller, and Dan Vandal, this just happened yesterday, so I'm switching gears here, but Dan Vandal has said he will not run again. Longtime MP out of St. Boniface. But there's also a lot of buzz, people talking about why. And there's a number of your colleagues, at least 20 elected representatives now, who've signed this document circulating among your fellow Liberals that are not in support of Justin Trudeau's leadership. Where do you stand on Justin Trudeau?
Look, I wouldn't mix the departures of those ministers with
Fair enough, yeah.
with the other situation. Dan has been an exceptional friend and colleague, particularly in my previous file with Indigenous issues. I'll miss him, but he's doing it for very personal reasons, and I think he would be the first to be shocked if it were suggested it was out of question of loyalty to the Prime Minister.
So
because he's an outstanding guy.
So
I'm given my position as a minister, given my proximity to the Prime Minister, I'm probably not the first person that people come to if they're pissed off at the Prime Minister. My own personal reflection on this, without knowing exactly who may or may not have signed a letter that may or may not exist, is that this is the most passive-aggressive, weak type of display of questioning of leadership that I've ever seen. The Prime Minister is colleagues with these individuals, if they are indeed in the numbers that are speculated to be. They owe it to him to go up and tell it to his face. And anyone that's come up to me with any issues with respect to the Prime Minister and said, you got to do this and you got to say this, just say it to his face. He's an open guy. He got them where they are today for the most part. And they owe it to him to say things to his face. And I think he would fundamentally respect that. If they're fearful, that's a reflection on them and their own leadership in their communities. This internal stuff happens. We've always encouraged a party that can speak out and quite harshly against each other at times, but actually to keep it private. And at the end of the day, it makes this group of people look horribly entitled and worried about their own futures. Say it to your face. Let's clear it up and let's focus on the bigger threat, which is what we're currently doing, which is sleepwalking into a Pierre Poilievre win who is only focused on himself and doesn't really care about this country. I know, say what you want about Justin Trudeau. He fundamentally cares about this country, and he's going to fight for every inch of it.
Thank you for all of the time. You've been very generous with us this morning. We appreciate having you in studio.
Thank you.